Anthony Joshua's driver has been charged with death by dangerous driving after a tragic crash that killed two of his friends and injured the boxer himself. The show 9-year-old Ayodele Adeniyi, a member of Joshua's Nigerian logistics team, when the former heavyweight champ visits the West African nation. The driver was discharged from hospital in Lagos late on New Year's Eve and has reportedly given a statement to police. Local media previously said he could still face prosecution for reckless driving.
All right. Welcome back to This Week in Africa, or Pan-African Perspectives. We're kind of doing a 2-in-1, and we're specifically talking about the dark side of Detty December. I'm at the airport right now, getting ready to board a flight to go to Vegas for the week. So we won't be able to have This Week in Africa this week. And so we're going to kind of have a conversation about Detty December and the dark side of it. As you can see, we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but as you can see, the driver has been arrested in the Anthony Joshua tragic car accident that happened in Nigeria. I want to just give you guys some details before we go deeper into this so that you guys can really understand the magnitude of what happened here. So number one, on December 29th, 2025, Anthony Joshua was involved in a fatal car crash in Ogun State, Nigeria. It was when his Lexus, or the Lexus he was in, the SUV carrying him and his friend, struck a stationary truck. Two members of his close team tragically passed, while Joshua survived with minor injuries and has since been discharged, and he has returned to the UK. Now, this tragedy became one of the defining and most somber stories, overshadowing the normally festive Detty December season across Lagos and the wider West African party circuit. I was in Sierra Leone. I was in Ghana when this happened. I was in Sierra Leone prior to that. And, a lot of us were talking about a number of different things. And I've heard a lot of takes on this particular topic. And one of the things that I think is really disheartening is, one, the discussion has only been about Anthony Joshua. He survived. And what I find in these kinds of tragedies is the only discussion is the person who's famous. And in this case, the person who's famous and survived. When two of his friends who spent a lot of time in West Africa, going to Ghana, going to Nigeria, these two are important people. So I first want to acknowledge who they were, because everybody's important. I want to acknowledge who they were, their names, and so you guys understand they were part of his team and what they did. So the two victims were his close friends and longtime performance staff, and forgive me if I get their names pronounced incorrectly, but it was Sina, Ghami, his strength and conditioning coach, and Latif, or Latz, Ayodele. That was his personal trainer. Both were described as key pillars of Anthony Joshua's physical preparation and part of his inner circle. Like I said, Ghani served as a strength and conditioning coach, responsible for building his power, endurance, and overall physical readiness for camp. Reports describe him as his closest collaborator, regularly working with him in the gym, including in the lead up to the Jake Paul fight, which he had just left. I think it was in Dubai. Ayodele was his personal trainer, handling daily training sessions, technical drills, physical maintenance, outside formal camp structures, just as kind of day to day. Both were reportedly or repeatedly referred to as close friends of his and team members, and they kind of formed the core of his team. Now, I wanted to make sure I called their names out just so we can at least acknowledge the two folks who did experience loss of life in this particular instance, because I don't think their names are really mentioned much, if at all, in many of the news reports. Now, I'm going to get back to this news report from The Sun because the driver was charged. We're going to play the rest of this video, but I'm going to give you my thoughts after this video is over, because I have a lot of thoughts about Detty December in general, and then specifically around driving and the unsafe driving that happens, and what I think you should do if you plan to visit during this time. So we're going to bring it back on stage, and I'll play that video.
Heartbreaking video of the incident showed an injured AJ being helped from the wreckage of the vehicle. AJ and the locally hired driver were both sitting on the opposite side from the boxing star's close friends, Sina and Latif, at the time of the horror crash on Monday and narrowly escaped death. Sina and Latif died on impact when the Lexus SUV they were riding in collided with a truck on the side of the notorious Lagos-Ibadan highway. The driver of the truck that Joshua's SUV collided with reportedly vanished moments after the fatal crash. He remains at large as Nigerian police frantically try to locate him.
All right, so now the other reports are the reason for the crash was that the driver overtook another driver. What I'm also reading, and I have yet to verify this independently or any other way, is that this driver has been arrested not only for all the reasons that we mentioned, reckless driving, but also because he did not have a license. I'm not 100% sure he did or did not have a license, but that is one of the reports that I just recently read this morning from a reputable news outlet. But here's the important piece that I think is really important. They overtook another vehicle and ran into a parked vehicle. And I can't tell you guys enough how often cars overtake other cars in West Africa. I know most of the time I talk about Ghana and Sierra Leone because that's where I spend most of my time, but I did spend a couple of weeks in Nigeria, and I do talk to people who live in Nigeria and who are there full time. I had colleagues that work there. I talk to people regularly who live there, and this is a common occurrence anytime throughout the year. But it's even more dangerous in the December months. In West Africa, you have kind of a culture of people overtaking other vehicles. So you have a vehicle in front of you that's driving slowly. You're on a roadside that has one lane going this way and one lane coming this way. And people repeatedly will go around the car in front of them into the opposite ongoing traffic to try to get in front of the next one. And they don't always time things perfectly. I don't know how many times I've been in near-death experiences. I had a friend of mine who mentioned this to me a week and a half ago, that she was in a near-death experience driving on a road from Bo to Freetown where the same thing happened. I had a friend in Nigeria told me they had a very recent experience where this happened to them. What I do whenever I'm in a car with a driver is I constantly remind them that our lives are too important for you to be rushing just to get around this vehicle. Number one, don't try to overtake going around a turn because you can't see who's coming. Two, if you're going to try to overtake, make sure that it's a very, 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 very uninhabited road, where there aren't very many people. And I would still recommend not doing it. Where you can see you can see straight for, the visibility is far enough that you can't see any vehicles coming. But I still don't recommend doing it because in this instance, they overtook and ran into a parked vehicle, which what probably happened is the other vehicle in front of them did not slow down enough for them to speed up and get back in front just fast enough. And that parked vehicle is what they ended up hitting, trying to get over. It is critical and crucial for you guys to know that many of the vehicles, Bolt especially, and sometimes these Uber vehicles do not have seatbelts that work in the back of the car. What I will do is before I get moving, because they may have seatbelts that work, they just are hard to find. So a lot of times drivers put the seat down, put the seat back up, and the seatbelt is behind the seat in the back seat, right? Or in other cases, the buckle on your side, if you're sitting, like you say the driver's here, you sit back here, a lot of times that buckle doesn't work. So I usually put it in the middle seatbelt buckle, or I will dig and fish for it and pull out the buckle if you can't find it. I've had a life-saving experience in a car accident about 15 years ago, almost 16 years ago. And after that, and I was wearing my seatbelt, and that was the only thing that saved me. And after that, I am a big advocate for wearing your seatbelt. I don't care if you're in the back, you're in the front, whatever vehicle you're in, you should be wearing your seatbelt. In many of these cases, the vehicles don't have seatbelts. Now, I don't know if that was the case for these two, because it seems like the main issue was that It just so happened to where the impact was, it took out those two gentlemen that were sitting on that side. Apparently, Anthony Joshua was sitting beside or behind the driver, and so he and the driver were the two that survived, and his two team members were on the other side of the vehicle where this happened and where the impact occurred. You know, this is one of many challenges I see with Detty December, right? And there are people who want to change the name Detty December. There are many people who want to change the name. There are people who told me they don't like the association with the time of year, because really, yeah, some people come there to party, and other people come there to really see family, and there are others that are really looking to see what we can do as a people to advance all African people. And you know, I think that the connotation is just a negative one. Detty December, people go to get dirty, right, and get wild, and there are a lot of there's a lot of backlash and fatigue that comes along with this idea of Detty December. Beyond the reckless driving, the massive amounts of traffic, which traffic is traffic. You know, you can deal with that anywhere, not a big deal. It's just how people drive erratically in that traffic is where the challenge is. And that to me was a big frustration for me, because I had to constantly tell the drivers of the vehicles that I was in to slow down, to stop driving so reckless. I mean, I've had this conversation with multiple drivers, because I was, you know, taking Uber and Bolt everywhere. Bolt's another ride-sharing service similar to Uber. It's just a European version. Lyft is not available in many West African countries, so Bolt, Uber, and there are others that are the ride-sharing services, Yango, etc. I really, when I saw this story, I wanted to think about it first before I communicated anything publicly, because so many people were jumping to talk about it, and they had a lot of takes. People had hot takes, and people want to be first to the story, right? People want to be able to get to the public and be able to share their thoughts and ideas. And although I think it's important to express your concern and to talk about these things, I do think it's important to really take a step back, gather all the details, and try to give thoughtful insight, as opposed to just trying to be first. And so that is why I waited till now to talk about this. It's very, very frustrating to me to see all the different ways people are trying to exploit this story, and just so they can get more views. And you know, the conversations around, you know, God saved Anthony, but then and he was spared for X, Y, and Z reasons, and they were not for other reasons. Yeah, here's what we do know: the driver was at fault 100%. And a couple things that also came up is that people said, well, you know, this is a big guy, he's a well-known figure, he should have police escorts, and he shouldn't be riding in that kind of a vehicle. And maybe those people are right, but this should not have been an outcome, regardless of whether or not he had police escorts or had a motorcade or had other people. I think maybe a more qualified driver, probably yes, but outside of that, you know, everybody deserves to be safe on the roads, or as safe as possible on the roads. It doesn't have to be because he's wealthy that he has a different experience riding on the roads than everybody else. You know, at the end of the day, everyone deserves the right to have a safe driving experience to whatever location they're going to. It was really disheartening to hear this story, and I watched the aftermath of the Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua, exhibition, and there was so many jokes about, Anthony Joshua and how there's like women in America discovering who he was, and I saw it as kind of a good thing for him, because it was a big payday for him, and he had some pretty major losses recently, and so to see him at least walk away with this is a ridiculous payday, I was like, I was happy for him, because it's a one way to kind of end your career as someone who was a former heavyweight champion of the world. So, But on the topic of, in keeping with this topic of this particular event, or the Dirty December, I want to talk about some of the other challenges and things that come up when people talk about this, because this is not just a car issue, right? There's backlash and there's fatigue around the rapid commercialization of Dirty December, which has driven up flight prices, hotel prices, local service prices. I mean, so let me give you guys an example. Over the last couple of years, when I fly in and out of Ghana, I usually fly into Sierra Leone first, fly one-way trip from Sierra Leone to Ghana, and then a return trip from Ghana to New York. And in September, when I took this trip, the flight was a little under $1,000, like 900 and something. When I booked it within 3 weeks of the flight. When December rolled around, I booked my flight 5 or 6 weeks before the flight time of departure. That flight was over $2,000 one way from Ghana to New York, and that was the cheapest flight on Ethiopian Airlines. The cheapest flight was like $2,150. September, that same flight was 900 and change, and that and I'm talking about 3 weeks to the flight in September versus 5 weeks to the flight in January. So you just see how the price gouging gets ridiculous when it comes to booking those flights. So that's a part of the challenge that people are having, and I'm hearing that the numbers weren't as high as initially expected. Many of the events that people talked about, people didn't go to, and I would imagine because the costs to even get there were exorbitant. So, it's obviously expensive. It's exclusionary because the locals can't even attend many of these events. It's draining for both locals and returning diaspora, especially in Ghana and Nigeria. There's this new term called Detty December fatigue, because it questions whether or not the brand is even good for Accra or Lagos long term. As I mentioned, the flights were ridiculous. Late December, they climbed more than double the off-season prices, with economy tickets in U.S. cities routinely jumping in the mid to $3,000 to $4,000 range. Like for me, I was buying one-way tickets, and I bought them, pretty early on. But the event tickets, table reservations, hotels, as I mentioned, all of them are exorbitant prices, or have exorbitant prices. And then obviously the locals cannot participate in many of these things. And then you have the issue of overcrowding, policing, and other bad experiences. Obviously, there are many who complained about heavy-handed policing, harassment, scams during December, and content creators obviously sharing live streams being roughly handled by officers in some cases, overcrowded venues, long traffic jams, poor crowd management. Those are all narratives that you hear people saying. Now, many of those things just have to do with the fact that many of these organizations doing these things are trying to make their money back. But I also think that there's this thought process that everybody who's traveling has the funds to do it. And look, at the end of the day, people are buying these tickets. But I think that there's a problem with prices just continuously increasing. And at some point, there's the law of diminishing returns, meaning that it gets to a point where it's too much that it has to correct itself. And I hope it does for next year and moving forward. I attended a few events myself that were relatively priced right, but there was a New Year's Eve event that was $200 a ticket. When I was in Sierra Leone, the prices for a table to watch Tiwa Savage at a club there was $1,000 minimum, and you can only see 2 people at the table. So what they did is they said, because what I was trying to do is I was like, okay, if we got 10 people, we can pay $100 each. That's not bad to see Tiwa Savage, right? What they said was, no, you pay $1,000 and that gets you 2 tickets and 1 bottle of alcohol at your table. And the prices went all the way up to $3,000. This is in Sierra Leone. You hear people talking about this in Nigeria and in Ghana as well, the table prices. Now, this is all for entertainment and enjoyment. So, obviously you take that with a grain of salt. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. It's your entertainment. But those prices are exorbitant, and they are going up and up because you have certain people who are coming in those months who maybe didn't earn their money legitimately. And so in many cases, they have that money to spend and they spend it ridiculously. But even beyond that, let's not worry about them. Let's just talk about the fact that these things become exclusionary. And then what you do is you turn something that became such an exciting experience from 2019 till now, right? There's been this conversation of the year of return and beyond the return and everybody being excited about coming to West Africa. And then you have situations like what happened with this car accident and what's happening with the price gouging. And what it does is it starts to reduce the attraction. Everyone's in it to try to make a buck instead of working together for us to uplift and move these countries forward, right? I mean, you have this influx of cash coming into these countries, billions of dollars per year, and just a couple of months worth of people traveling. But are we seeing the impact of all that money coming into the country? Are the roads getting better? Is the infrastructure improving? These are all questions we have to ask ourselves. And these are all things that I think are important to discuss. And look, as always, my goal here is to always talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because I still want people to come to Africa, but I also want them to come with their eyes open and to curate their experiences to ensure that they're maximizing their experience and getting the most from it. And then I'm also speaking to those who are involved in event creation and curating experiences for people who come. Let's try to think about how we can make this affordable and an experience that people want to return year after year after year. At some point, like I said, you get the law of diminishing returns. For me, I'm already done with the major nightlife. I mean, I do vlog some of these things, but I'm not trying to stay, and stay out all night, go to every major party and event, because for me, it's really more about the networking and getting content to you all. I shot 26 pieces of content in the 2 weeks that I was there, because I want you guys to see what the experience can be like if you want to do it in a way that is not like, opulent or extravagant, but just enjoying your time, but also gaining the experience, going to the Kwame and Nkrumah Museum, going to a couple of the events, meeting people, talking to people who've moved and hearing their experiences. These are all things that I want to share with you all. But I also want to make sure you're aware of what is happening and what's happening for those who come back repeatedly, right? These are the things that we're seeing. And, I don't want to discourage anybody from traveling. I just want to give people an insight into what to expect and how to make sure you ensure your safety. Find a way to make sure that the seatbelt is on. Make sure that your drivers do not overtake other people. Don't go to events that cost $200 for New Year's or $1,000 or $3,000 for a table. I think the more that we decide that we're not going to patronize businesses that do those things, the better off we are at ensuring that people bring the prices down to normal. And so, those are my thoughts on those things. One of the other things I wanted to mention that I don't think it's brought up enough is that, Anthony Joshua 6 or 7 months ago had a video where he was talking about the idea of staying humble and living every day like it's your last. And what I wanted to do was actually kind of share what he had to say, because I think it's kind of ominous, but important. But first, I want to share a collage with you guys of some videos of him and his friends and their experience, so you can get a chance to see more about who these guys were, because these gentlemen are the people that were a part of his inner circle and his team. Again, you have his strength and conditioning coach, and you have this personal trainer. So as you watch this video, I want to say their names again. So Sina, Ghami, who served as a strength and conditioning coach responsible for building power, endurance, and overall physical readiness in camps, during his camps. And then you have Latif or Latz, Ayodele, He was Joshua's personal trainer, handling daily training sessions, daily technical drills and physical maintenance outside of his structure of camp, because camp gets you ready for a fight. This is outside of the fight. So these are his friends. And lastly, I want to leave you with this video where he mentioned that people that have more than he's gotten, he's going to say some things that I think were really important that we should probably take heed and listen to, because at the end of the day, it really does give you an idea about the way he thinks, and I'm sure now these words are more true than ever. So I'm going to play this video and leave you some final thoughts afterwards.
I've lost everything. So what's to say God can't take it all away from me? So let me just watch how I step. You know what I mean? Not one of us that's living, that has entered this earth, has left it alive. So while you're chasing your goals and your dreams, I think you should always try and find a deeper meaning to what your life means, because the materialistic goals and achievements aren't all that glitters. I think there's more to it than that. So I think at one side, go out there and achieve everything that you can physically. But while you're doing that, don't forget how it's affecting you spiritually. That's like internally, like what's your purpose and why are you really here on earth? I know it's deep, but that's real, bro.
It was deep. And he's lucky to be here with us now, to be able to send his friends off. There was a recent funeral, I think today, and as a matter of fact, if it wasn't yet yesterday evening, where he was able to pay his last respects. It is something that we should all be paying attention to and should be really, really weary of, and just think these things through. When you're on the road and you're going to wherever you're going and you're enjoying Detty December, don't assume that driver is operating in a way that is going to keep you safe. You are responsible for your safety, and you're going to have to remind them and tell them to slow down, don't drive so recklessly, all those kinds of things. I do it constantly because I've seen so many accidents on the road when I've been in Sierra Leone. I've seen some accidents in Ghana as well. And then, of course, I've heard about so many accidents happening in Nigeria. And so, people kind of drive past these things and don't really think about it. They disassociate themselves with it. Like, it can't happen to you. It can happen to any one of us. And so you just need to do your best to try to manage the situation so that your driver is keeping you safe. And then the other piece of it is the exorbitant costs. Book your ticket far in advance. If you know you're going to Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Senegal, wherever, West Africa, book your ticket far in advance. If it's your first time going, maybe you book with a travel company, because they'll book it far in advance and they'll have favorable pricing. So you'll be able to get it far in advance early enough. You don't have to pay those exorbitant prices. And make sure you book your place of stay and book your flights at least 4 months in advance if you can. That is the recommendation I have for you. And so those are the notes that I have. I hope they were helpful. If you guys have any thoughts or questions, put them in the comments below. I'll be able to read the playback notes and thoughts that you guys have. The merch is available. This was the hat that I was telling you guys about. Remember, I was looking at different versions of the hats. So this is one of them. This is the cheaper one. I think this is going to go for about $20. I have another one that goes for like $30. It's Under Armour. But I have the logo without the words Authentic African in the middle, because from what I told you before, I can't do it on these hats because it's too small to type. So you guys will have to let me know what you guys think of this hat and the other ones on site. But I will absolutely do my best to get you more merch and to go live next week with Ivy on topics all about what's happening in Ghana and what happened in Ghana over Detty December, or what I should say is December in Ghana, because that's the new branding of it. And then we will go live at the end of next week, next Thursday, to talk about news happening in Ghana. So with that, I'm going to leave you guys with be safe, be smart. Thank you if you watched this far. Make sure you hit that thumbs up if you like this video. If you had any questions that you feel like I did not answer, put them in the comments below. If you know anybody who's planning to go to Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, West Africa in general in December of 2026, make sure you share this video with them. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're notified every time a new video comes out. So with that, thanks for watching. See you all next video. Bye, guys.